Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Daily Fix. I am your usual host and presenter, Advocate Filohoyani. In typical fashion, the sons of MEYIWA trial got off to a heated start this morning. What an encounter between Advocate Mnisi on the one hand and Judge Ratamukwating and Baloyi on the other. Let us just recap what happened. And before I just recap, let me tell you that this has been a feature of this trial. Now let me get to the recap itself. When the trial started, Advocate Mnisi continued with this cross-examination of Gininda. You recall how yesterday Gininda was simply wiped off the face of this earth by Mnisi's cross-examination. So when it continued this morning, Mnisi went straight into the memo that Gininda had prepared and which he presented to the prosecuting authorities to have the 5 accused persons charged with the crimes that they are facing before the Pretoria High Court. It was an uphill battle for him, with several objections coming from Baloyi. You see, at every stage, Baloyi was bent on disrupting Mnisi's cross-examination. Baloyi kept on telling that court that, these things had been disclosed, that they were part of, the record, and that what Advocate Mnisi was looking forward to had already been disclosed to the court. But Mnisi stood his ground. He really stood his ground. And at some stage also, we saw, flashes of what we have come to get used to in this trial, of Judge Ratamukwating intervening to say, but this is privileged information like Baloyi had contended. You see, Baloyi took the view that communication between Gininda and the prosecutors was privileged information, like for instance, information between an advocate and his client is privileged information. This was also echoed by the judge, in support of Baloyi, that, there is no obligation, Gininda was under no obligation, to disclose what had transpired between him and the prosecutors. In this case, I'm definitely sure it was Baloyi and others. Now, but Advocate Mnisi stood his ground. He stood his ground. A very interesting thing is he pushed and pushed and pushed until Gininda had to read that memo, that affidavit, which he had submitted to the prosecuting authorities, motivating why the 5 accused persons should be charged. At some stage, because Mnisi was not, about to give up, Gininda had to go through that affidavit all over again. So Mnisi stood there listening to Gininda go over the summary of the evidence that had been gathered, that eventually he presented to the prosecuting authorities, so that the people in the Pretoria High Court now facing charges in the Pretoria High Court could be charged. At some stage when Gininda was going through that affidavit, Advocate Mnisi intervened and said, "You stop right there." He wanted to put some questions to him, apparently because he did not want him to run through that affidavit before he does so. No sooner had Advocate Mnisi done that, Judge Ratamukwating was on him to say, no, let him read the whole thing, in effect dictating how Mnisi must conduct his cross-examination. You see, if Mnisi wanted to cross-examine Gininda, halfway through Gininda's reading of that affidavit, he was perfectly entitled to do so. He was under no obligation at all to let Gininda run through the whole affidavit before he poses any question at him. And in this, he was overruled by the judge. And this came shortly before the adjournment. When I heard, when the court adjourned, shortly after that, I overheard Advocate Mnisi saying to Attorney Ramsipili, I will not let him dictate as to how I should conduct my cross-examination. That is very, very clear. And also looking at, audio clips and audio and visual clips of the case, that comes out very clearly, where Advocate Mnisi says, I will not be dictated to as to how I should conduct my cross-examination. So it was a very heated encounter because, you see, and when a defense counsel cross-examines like Advocate Mnisi was doing, he was perfectly entitled to stop Gininda reading through the whole memorandum or affidavit that he had presented to the prosecuting authorities, motivating why these people should be charged. So it was interference, direct interference by the judge to stop him, to say, no, you listen to the whole affidavit or the whole memorandum, let it all be, regurgitated by Gininda into the record, and only then can you start posing questions after he has read it all. So it was a very stormy encounter that we saw this morning in this trial. And of course, the real worry for me is the attitude of the judge vis-a-vis the defense. We have always said in this trial that, Judge Atamokwate seems to be, leaning towards the defense and in favor of the prosecution, because he seemed to be in support of everything that Balui was saying. Another incident which caught my attention was when he asked Gininda, have any of these people ever brought any applications to quash those charges? In other words, to challenge the charges that they are now facing in court. And Gininda replied and said, to my knowledge, there have been no such applications. You see, sort of building up the prosecution case to say, although Mnisi is now coming up with questions around how those people eventually got, charged by the National Prosecuting Authority, they had in fact never challenged those charges, an unwarranted intervention, because rightly that should have been a point that should have been taken perhaps by Baloi under the examination. But there you have it. The Senzo MEYIWA trial is back on track, and we are seeing a lot of what we have seen in the past, harassment of the defense. But having said that, I will again in the next episode tomorrow morning bring up insights into how this encounter, how this confrontation between Advocate Mnisi, the judge, and Baloi on the other hand, is just panning out. And like I've said in my opener or earlier on, this has been characteristic of this trial. Having said that, let me thank you for watching this video and watching all the other videos. Please like, share, and subscribe to these videos, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.